Well, it's 11 o'clock and let's get
Okay.
started. Good morning. My name is Jan Schmitz and I'm from the Edmonton Pride Seniors Group. It's November 17th and thank you all for attending our Aging with Pride discussion group for the two LGBTQIA plus seniors and their allies. Thank you too to our partners, SAGE and the Pride Center of Edmonton. Before I introduce our speaker, I must acknowledge that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respect the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our lives. Two housekeeping items. Firstly, I must let you know that this session will be recorded for future use on our YouTube channel. If you don't wish your image to be recorded, please close your video feed. Secondly, may I remind you of the code of conduct outlined in your Zoom invitation. And now, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce our speaker. Heather got a full-time job at Blockbuster Video in 2002, and her life has revolved around movies ever since. She soon ditched the polo shirt and khakis to work at an alternative video spot in Old Strathcona and co-owned the Videodrome from 2009 to 2013. Following the video store era, Heather went on to program workshops and events for local independent filmmakers at Fava programming department. In December of 2021, she was hired as programming manager at Metro Cinema, where she gets to put her knowledge of film to good use full-time. Heather also holds a degree in sociology, a diploma in photography, and is passionate about community building, celluloid photography, and walking. Over to you, Heather.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. This is really great. And yeah, that's basically who I am. I have been, living a life that completely revolves around film for my adult life. And you might have gathered that I'm pretty new as an employee at Metro. I was hired here in December and we very quickly closed for the pandemic. And so I've basically been programming films here since we reopened in February of this year. However, I was a volunteer at Metro prior to that. I was on the board for 5 years, and I also ran Metro Cinema's programming committee, and we'll get into like what that means, what Metro is, and what involvement in it entails, and why it might be relevant to the people here in this meeting today. We recently partnered with Pride Center and the Pride Seniors Group for screening. And so I am learning about your organization. I think it's absolutely great. My dad is a senior and a member of the LGBT community, and he lives in a town of 600 people in Newfoundland. So he doesn't have anything like this, but I think that if he lived here, he would absolutely love to be involved. So so I have made a little PowerPoint to kind of go over what Metro does and ways to be involved. Mainly it's just to kind of keep me on track, but I'm going to share my screen so you can see it. Okay, can everyone see that? Just a sec here. Seeing it? Great. Okay, so first of all, I'm just wondering if I can see a show of hands of who has been to Metro Cinema before? Excellent. Okay, I think that's everyone. So some of this may be stuff you already know, but a lot of people who come to Metro are really coming as like a patron and not really aware of what we are as an organization. So I'll just get into that a bit. I had some fun with the PowerPoint transitions. Okay, so what is Metro? So just to go a little bit into the history, I don't actually know exactly when Metro began because it has kind of had different names in the past and operated as in different styles of programming. But certainly we've been around since the 80s, if not earlier, depending on kind of like what you call Metro cinema. And definitely the goals of Metro have evolved over time as the industry and art form of film have changed. So for many years, Metro existed to provide screening opportunities for films that were otherwise impossible or near impossible to see locally. So they were not mainstream enough to be played in mainstream theaters. Obviously, film as a access to film at home was a lot more limited. Maybe your video store wouldn't carry these films, or they would be limited in their availability. And so I think kind of inherent in that was always this idea that there are films that are less mainstream and therefore representing kind of marginalized voices. And that was a huge part of the mandate of Metro, was kind of bringing those stories to the screen, engaging the community around those types of films, having discussions around those types of films. So that's still very much a part of what we do, but obviously film accessibility is has changed entirely, right? A lot of films are now available through streaming services, and it's just a very different world, even in terms of what gets funded to be made, what independent film looks like, all of those kinds of things. So what I have here is just what we have on our website in terms of our mandate. So we are a community-based not-for-profit society devoted to creating and fostering opportunities for the exhibition of diverse, unique, shared viewing experiences in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. So to expand on that a little bit, our emphasis has really shifted from making these films available and creating a community experience around film. So film has moved to the private sphere a lot of the time, people watching them in their own homes by themselves. And we are trying to engage community around film as an art form and a form of communication and fostering dialogue. So we believe that film and media arts are significant art forms. Film and media arts are a means of fostering open communication, education, and community. Film and media arts should be inclusive and accessible to everyone. What we do, we program a diverse blend of film and media arts by presenting educational, independent, cultural, and innovative works. We facilitate engagement and interaction between audiences and the content by offering additional resources and interactive experiences. We provide diverse opportunities for individuals or community groups to curate series, host film festivals and special events, and screen their own works. We operate with the ongoing assistance of a large volunteer base, keeping our programming as affordable as possible for our patrons while also providing an opportunity for them to get more involved with us. So what does all that look like? I've just kind of quickly put together some images to kind of distinguish our different streams of programming. So we present every month new films that you're not going to see in mainstream cinemas. These are usually films that are coming out of the festival circuit, critically acclaimed, often international films. So I've just given 3 examples of movies we have coming up here. The first picture is Tilda Swinton in a film called The Eternal Daughter. This is by a British director, Joanna Hogg. The next one is a film called EO, from the perspective of a donkey, from Poland. And the final one is a Korean film called Decision to Leave. This is from a prolific Korean director, Park Chan-wook. We also make space for new restorations of films that have recently gone through the process of having a new digital transfer of an old film print. often this will also center around an anniversary of a film. So as some examples here, oh, that last picture didn't work out very well. We've got the 1922 film Nosferatu, which is experiencing its centennial year this year. So we screened that in September. We have The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie, which is a Spanish surrealist, French-Spanish surrealist film, having its 50th anniversary this year. And then the last one, though you can't see him, Gene Hackman there in The Conversation, Francis Ford Coppola film from the 70s. So this is a bit of like film history that we are, conveying to people, all of these films influential in their own right. And so we try to highlight those and expand people's knowledge of like the art form. And then we have regular series that we use to kind of like preserve and dedicate certain types of programming. So once a month, we have something called Sunday Classics, where we are featuring films from the classic Hollywood era. Sometimes they will be restorations as well. Sometimes they're programmed around a specific monthly theme. So in December, we've got The Shop Around the Corner, which is a Christmas film. Singing in the Rain was a 50th anniversary as well this year. This weekend, we'll be playing The Manchurian Candidate as a tribute to Angela Lansbury, who recently passed. We also do a monthly series on music documentaries. And so this is just two examples. There's a Brian Wilson documentary played a few months back, and a documentary about the song Hallelujah. And we always try to pair these films with a local musical performance. So we'll have a local band come and play a half-hour performance before the film. So it's actually a really affordable way to see local music. You're basically just paying the cost of admission to see a film, and you're getting a performance as well. So we're supporting local musicians, connecting them with audience that might be interested in what they're doing. Usually the band that's picked or the artist that's picked is along a similar style of music to the film that we're playing. And then, of course, Showing Pride, which was how this kind of all came together. So this is a bi-monthly series that we're doing in partnership with the Pride Center. So sometimes some of these series are just strictly our own, they're internally handled. But as a community nonprofit organization, it's very much a part of our goals to kind of be a platform for other organizations. So we really believe that film is a great way to connect with new people. It's a great way to foster conversations. And so it's a resource that we can provide to other organizations to access that. It's just most people don't have access to a film theater. And so that can also include performances before the films or talkbacks after the film. So in October, we screened Supernova and with the Sage and all the organizations here, and had a panel discussion after that. In December, we have the film Rent coming up, just for identification of the pictures. So the first one is Supernova, Rent, and then Paris is Burning, which we screened back in the spring. And another goal of this series, I think the way that we've thought about LGBTQ plus films in the past, it's kind of changed over time. So when in the early days of Metro, this very much would have been kind of countercultural. Anytime you would play films by queer filmmakers, there would be, it was kind of by definition not mainstream for the most part. The film has certainly gotten more representative over time, But we were finding that, during Pride Month, we would be focusing a lot on this kind of film, and we wanted to make sure that this was not being just like siloed into 1 month, that we wanted to be like regularly showing this area of film, basically. And then this is another way that we fulfill our mandate to be a community-based cinema, is that we have regular guest programming. So every year we put out a call for submissions for ideas for monthly programming series. And then people propose different programming ideas. And it can be a variety of people programming these. We have a committee that selects the ones that we want to move forward with. And sometimes it's just, someone is a huge fan of Japanese animation and knows everything about it and wants to pick a bunch that we can screen within a particular month. And if they have identified that they know what they're talking about, that they can contextualize these films well, that's really all that's required. But sometimes we have people apply who have a little bit extra that they can bring to the table. So in December, we are presenting a series on, it's called Women After the War. That's the pictures that you're seeing here. And we have a university academic who is specifically focusing on how women were represented in Hollywood cinema in kind of like post-war America. So the films they've got here are The Apartment from 1960, Clute, Wanda, and Norma Ray. And so all of these films will be screened with a panel discussion after going into some of the themes that are the focus of the series. So that is just a very brief overview of kind of the different things that Metro does. But that's really just to get started on this side of things, which is like how we can get folks like you involved, because as community-based cinema, we want people, representatives of all different communities, to be actively involved in the organization. And obviously people who are passionate about film and what we do, of course, is important as well. So there's, a variety of ways that you can come out, support, or actively kind of engage in the stuff that we do. Base level is just coming to see the movies, of course. If you're someone who plans on coming to see a lot of movies, we would encourage you to get a silver screen membership. This is $300 to see virtually everything that we put on in a year. So one thing I didn't mention is that we do rent out the theater, and some of our rentals, you would not be able to use your silver screen membership with them, but by and large, the cost of the silver membership will get you far more than, if you were going to basically like four or five movies a month, it would be more than worth it. So, and then that, as a silver screen member, you can immediately opt in to be a society member of our organization. So as a nonprofit, we do have society membership. And there's a few different ways you can gain access to that. As I mentioned, silver screen membership, a donation of $100 or more, or 12 hours of volunteer time, I believe, is the current standard. So once you have done one of those three things within a calendar year, then you can opt into membership. And that allows you to vote at our AGM for our board of directors. And that AGM is actually coming up, I believe, on, don't quote me on this, I think it's November 25th. But it's right away. So if you are just interested in seeing more of the that side of how Metro operates, that is open to the public. You can come and check it out. You can ask questions about, kind of anything, basically, about how we make certain decisions, how we allocate our budget. I mentioned volunteering, so there are a number of ways you can volunteer at Metro. You can come and work the front of house and give out popcorn. We actually have designers who volunteer to do custom posters for all of our films. And then of course you can join a committee. So we have multiple standing committees that help us operate. We have a programming committee, and they are the people who go through that selection process with guest programmers. A guest programmer is a type of volunteer. We consider that's a lot of volunteer time that goes into that planning. And so we would consider those people volunteers as well. We also have a committee for fundraising, a committee for audience development, so outreach, reaching audiences that we currently aren't. We really feel like we screen films for virtually everyone, and not everyone knows that they can find something for them here. So just finding ways to access those communities. And then for those who are like very interested in the behind the scenes operation and management of the organization, they can, become a board member and be actively involved in that. So obviously we encourage getting involved in other ways first. But yeah, that's how as I got involved. I was on the board for 5 years. So that is what I have to say. But I'm really interested in hearing from folks here on their experience of what we do, of what they would like to see. In particular, I'm really curious to hear if you've experienced obstacles to coming to Metro or being involved, whether that's not being aware of what we're doing and we're not doing a good enough job of communicating what we're doing, whether it's like very functional, like there's, it's very difficult for you to get to us, or there's obstacles within the building. And then additionally, what kind of programming you would like to see. Oh, there we go. I already have one in the chat. Do you want me to read this out, Jan? Do you want to jump in here?
Whatever you prefer, Heather. If you want to read it, please go ahead.
Okay, so I'm just reading it just a sec here. Okay, yeah, so student films from British Columbia and Alberta. Sorry, I'm not sure what this next one means. I would say let's open it up to chat. Yeah.
Okay. Could we maybe not share your screen and we could see more people if they're waving their hands or wanting to jump in there? Sure. And I think the chat that Sydney wrote, she would like a program idea suggestion. During COVID, it felt like the connection between British Columbia and Alberta was a bit damaged. The UBC Department of Theatre and Film, seeing films of their students or staff may be an LGBTQ theme. Jokes re BC Wine and Alberta Gas. So I think Sydney has a story to tell there. Sydney, do you want to speak up about your comment there?
Hi there. It just occurred to me, I don't know if you all noticed this, but there was some bruising stuff during COVID about, and just before, about how Alberta and BC were relating. And I just thought it might be kind of cool to do some things that kind of, welcomed that film influence and maybe lightly joked about BC Wine and Alberta Gas, because those are two of the things that people got very sharp about during COVID. And I'm just seeing so many sensitive people who may be oversensitive these days, who they're not connecting in the way we used to. So it would be just a little suggestion perhaps for a program that we might be easily happy to support. I know everyone on this coordinating group just loves student performances and loves the U of A, and UBC is just doing some incredible work. So yeah, it's kind of a vague, wordy suggestion I'm making, and I came in late, but it also could be sessions on that Jan and Larry do on this format that would connect with it. So I think it could help both organizations to kind of build a bridge, rebuild something other than the Coquihalla Highway between here and Vancouver.
That's a really interesting suggestion. It makes me think of a few different things. So first of all, we do occasionally do collections of local student work. It's been a little while, and I think that's probably also because of the pandemic has made it harder for student films to be made, right? But we actually do have a screening coming up this week that's very cool. There's an organization called Girls in Film and Television. So it's a branch of Women in Film and Television. And so they train, you know, preteens and teens on filmmaking. And then they've actually made like an entire hour-long film where, you know, there's an adult directing it. And then you have like a bunch of youth working to put this film together. So, and I believe that's just like free by donation. It also just reminded me, not exactly connected to what you're saying, but we also have a collection of local films coming up as part of our monthly series called Homegrown Cinema, which focuses on Alberta made work. And it's a collection of shorts by director Trevor Anderson, who he recently released his first feature, which we screened here before I changed my mind, about a young non-binary kid in Red Deer in 1987. Full disclosure, I acted in that movie in a very small role, but it is a really, really cool film. And so he got his start making shorts for LGBT festivals around North America. And his collection of shorts is really, really remarkable. And so that's coming up on November 28th. And then the final thing I wanted to mention is that sometimes if something's like overtly political in nature, we might not want to program it ourselves, but instead facilitate some kind of partnership or rental with someone who, you know, it makes a bit more sense for them to be engaging on that level. So we did recently have a screening that was a rental. So they rented the theater and they screened a film called No Visible Trauma about police malfeasance in Calgary. And then they had after a discussion and stuff like that. So we're not afraid to touch those things, but sometimes it just makes more sense for the people who are like more actively involved in that to kind of take the reins and yeah.
Makes sense.
Well, thanks for that, Sydney. I remember the news when people with Alberta license plates were in BC and they were receiving threatening notes on their windshields and their cars were being attacked. It wasn't a very nice time. Thanks for that comment. So we have a few comments. I see we'll go in this order. We'll start with Guy and then we'll take Eric and then Larry. So please go ahead, Guy.
And Roy is also on the list.
Heather, thank you so much for the fascinating presentation. I just wanted to answer your question about barriers. When I consider going out to a venue now, I pay attention to a couple of things. Ventilation and how safely I'll be able to maneuver and be seated in the venue. And like, to be honest, the reason why I don't go to Metro right now in this time period, especially given all the news that we're getting recently now about the 3 illnesses that are hitting the hospitals, I just kind of say to myself, you know, it's not really safe enough for me. Even if I'm masked, it's probably going to be really crowded. And I know it's a really old building. And I once asked, I think the ventilation is quite like poor, like it is what it is. So you asked about barriers. That's why I won't go right now. When I feel better about COVID, I will go. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, we totally recognize that that not everyone is feeling comfortable in a group environment like that, and especially in a space like ours. I will say, for those who are curious or maybe don't know the space as well, it is a 500-seat theater, so it is unusual for us to sell out. And often, you know, if you get 10 people coming to a screening, which does happen, you know, fairly regularly, then there's a lot of room for spacing out. We do also have like a fog machine that we use occasionally that's supposed to help, you know, easily sanitize the space. But absolutely, you know, we wish we could offer, you know, in the beginning of the pandemic, distributors were giving us the option of making some of the films available online, because all the theaters were shut down. This was something that they could make the infrastructure for, and now that's not an option that's available to us anymore. So hoping we can do the best we can, and, you know, yeah, accepting the reality of where we're at right now.
Thank you, Guy. And the next three participants, Eric, followed by Larry, and then Roy. Go ahead, Eric.
Okay, yeah, a couple of things. One is that what the biggest barrier is mentally. After I watch a movie at home, I think, oh, we should have gone out. There is nothing in my mind, because I'm old, nothing compares to being in a theater, eating theater popcorn and having a pop. It is really good. So I just need to retrain myself on that. In the terms of when we did the Supernova presentation, I know that the conversation on that had gone on for quite a long time. But what I'd like to know is roughly what would be the lead time. If somebody said, I want, you know, that March is whatever month, and I'd like to do a special screening with a panel on that topic in the month of March, when would they normally, you know, what would the lead time be? Would they start talking to you in like December or November or January?
Right. So obviously, definitely the sooner you can get in touch with us, the better. Like, we do sometimes plan things quite far in advance. We recently had the campus food bank approach us about doing a screening on, I believe it's Food Insecurity Day, which is in May. So, you know, that is like far, far, far away. And in terms of my programming, I'm not thinking about May yet. We don't really have any, we have, you know, except for a couple of regular festivals that happen in that time, we don't have any rentals happening, but we can just say, yes, absolutely, let's do that screening. And then we can start talking about the details down the road. That said, usually about 6 weeks in advance is a pretty safe bet. Like right now, I'm finishing the December programming right now and starting to work on January. That just the 6 weeks kind of guarantees there's probably not a ton of rentals around that time. And especially if you're not like specifically locked into a specific day, you know that you want to do it within a week or something. It's pretty safe. Yeah, so anytime between forever and 6 weeks, and then if it's even shorter than that, then it doesn't hurt to ask. We might just say, unfortunately, it's not going to work out this time, right? So.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Eric. Larry, please go ahead.
I was struck at the screening of Supernova about how useful it was in the way of bringing the community together, the audience who were there, and that clearly is part of your mandate. So I am wondering, there are a series of LGBTQ films going back, you know, quite a ways. At the present Pride Center, you showed 3 of them. How frequently is that done, and are they always followed by or preceded by sort of open discussions and panels?
That's a great question. So yeah, right now we do those bi-monthly. So we would have one, and they're typically the last Thursday of the month. So we had one in April. Can't remember exactly when we started. I think it was April, June, August, October, and now we have one coming up in December. And they don't always have an added component, and that's, I think, mainly due to capacity limitations of the organization. So if you I think if you had an idea for added content for a particular film that they've selected, then it wouldn't hurt to reach out, and if you wanted to collaborate with them. We kind of collaborate with them in terms of programming. So if we know that there's like a new restoration of something coming up that would fit well with their programming, or a new release film, we will send it their way. And then ultimately they, as an organization, are the ones that pick the films. So if they pick certain things, and this is only 6 times a year, you know, we still have other films that we would certainly, you know, depending on the, you know, historical relevance and quality and all of those things, like we will, you know, take all those other films and program them on our own as just regular Metro programming.
Yes, well, we'll certainly communicate with the people at Pride Center, who are one of the partners of Aging with Pride. So, yeah.
Thank you, Larry. We'll hear from Roy, followed by Joan, and then Robert. Please go ahead, Roy.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask Heather a couple of questions, if I may. A couple of things is, I'm not sure what kind of social media outlets you are using to keep the public informed of what your listings are. But I know that, like ourselves, Aging with Pride has a monthly communication that perhaps you could dovetail into that to outline what is upcoming in the next month or two, particularly if it's of interest in a specific area. I know that Sage also has a similar communication, and particularly for the Hollywood classics, that might be a group that would be very interested in that outlet. So I do find it, Metro is not top of mind for me because it's hard to find you. So your website is great. I don't see a huge Facebook presence by yourselves. So that's something, I don't know whether you want to go down that route, but it's something to consider. I was just wondering as well if you are connected at all, or would consider being connected to the Edmonton International Film Festival. I go to that regularly, and it's always at the Landmark downtown, but I never see that Metro is hosting any of those films. And it might be an idea to bring in more revenue or whatever.
All very great points. Thank you. I love the idea of being in the newsletter and just sending you the films that might be relevant to your audience and getting them in. And same with Sage. We are on Facebook, and interestingly, apparently most of our hits to our website come through Facebook, but I know personally I'm on Facebook and I never see the posts. And so I think it's just the way that Facebook is changing and how its AI is determining what gets seen. I don't know if there's like anything that we can do about it, but we're certainly looking into it. And then the last thing, ICE. Yes, so the Edmonton International Film Festival, we do occasionally work with. I think primarily they want to be a downtown festival. So they like kind of having all of it. And, you know, every year there are discussions about whether they want to host screenings here, and we're very much open to it. And in this past season, we did do one screening of theirs. It was like an encore screening of 2 of the films on I'm pausing before I try to remember the name of the day, but it was like an Aboriginal People's Day or Truth and Reconciliation Day. Anyway, they screened some films that were like thematically related to that with us here. So I mean, yes, we love to be partners with many local festivals, and sometimes it doesn't quite work out. Was there another part of your question? Okay. But definitely I appreciate you letting us know that where some of our messaging is not getting through. I will mention, I don't know if anyone here is someone who actively uses a Google Calendar. I feel like there's like just a deep divide between people who love them and use them and people who have no desire at all to use a Google Calendar. But we are currently working on making our calendar shareable to people's Google Calendars. So you could just click a link, say add calendar, and then you will always see what we're playing on every night for the next, 2 to 4 weeks. So that's, I think, a really exciting way to, and then each event will have the link to the website listing right in it. So you can find out more about what each thing is.
Thanks, Roy. Joan, did you want to give a comment or?
Yeah, for sure. Hi, Heather. This is all awesome. I'm just curious about the transformation from digital to celluloid and how that affects you. I assume that you're showing all the films still on celluloid, or maybe a little bit of both, I'm not sure. And the restoration part of it is all very interesting to me. If you have time to chat about that, if you have any more. And the other thing is, when people submit films to you, are they digital, and then do you have to go backwards?
This is a great question for me. I don't know if you caught the introduction to me, but celluloid film is a personal passion. So most of what we screen now is digital. That transition happened in around 2012. That said, we do still have our 35mm film projector, and we just recently got it going again to do a film screening of The Shining, which was a sellout screening, which was so fun. And so we would like to do that from time to time, but definitely it is a bit cost prohibitive. So in the days of film, it was still very expensive to ship film from theater to theater, but it was a little bit more manageable because you would be getting it from like the next theater down the line. And now they're generally like, there's only a few theaters in the world at this point who are playing them. And so you kind of have to pay to get it shipped from who knows where. And so yeah, it adds to our costs. So it kind of limits what we can screen on film. But that's also, I think, a huge part of, the history of film is very important to us. And this is how we grew up watching movies, right? I think even, younger people forget how recently that transition really happened. So with people, if we have like a local filmmaker and they've shot something on film, like that's easy. And they can screen it with us. If they're sending us something called a DCP, which is basically the standard industry digital projection format. And so that's, and that has definitely made a lot of things more accessible, like with film, if there were, I don't know, however many film prints circulating, but if they're all in use, then you can't screen it. DCP obviously doesn't work that way. If they can just send you a file, digitally, and we can screen it within a few hours of getting it. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, just quickly about the restoration part of it. So when you're restoring celluloid, you are actually restoring the film, and then do you convert it afterwards, or not?
So we don't handle that. So those are often like distributors, boutique distributors will buy the rights to a film, often around, like they'll find a print that's in pretty good condition and they'll be like, okay, we're going to make a digital digital restoration of this. So yeah, in that case, sometimes you have like a whole team of people like zooming in on each individual frame and cleaning up any like scratches that have happened on the film and making sure the colors match like how they were supposed to originally look, and definitely more like intensive than I'm aware of even, but it is pretty cool. And then they'll actually even make a brand new print from that. So you can go from digital back to a film print and circulate that around. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Joan. Robert, please go ahead.
Thanks. Feel my hand here. So I'm from Saskatoon, and had never heard of the Metro Theatre until the promo for this came out, and I thought, oh, I wonder if this was a theater that was very popular in the 60s and 70s and has some tie to the LGBTQ community, and it'll be interesting to hear what the history was. But obviously, that's not it. We have we'll call it a sister theater in Saskatoon, which has promoted itself as it's the Broadway Theatre, and has promoted itself as the only community-owned theater in Canada. I obviously they're playing with words a little bit. Maybe it's because they own the building. I don't know, but it is run by a board and sounds very similar. And of course, shut down during COVID. And the marquee said, "Love each other, wash your hands," and that was up for months, right? So they have reopened. Very few films. They always manage. Their key to financial success has been, the normal is a film at 7, a film at 9, 7 days a week, occasional matinee on the weekends. They have special events like you do. So there'll be a comedian come through or some kind of concert, and those always get priority over the films because they're money makers. So they're back on limited number of films scattered around, which to me means that the attendance has not been coming back. I'm not surprised at that. I haven't been back, but then I've been to 3 movies since COVID hit. I'm going to go to the Broadway on the Saturday. I understand their website says masks required, and I've been told that they are, I think it sounds like a theater of a similar size, that they've got seats designated of where you can sit and where you can't sit to have people spaced out. Whether they've kept to that or not, I don't know. So I guess wrapping that part up, my question is, have you found that your attendance has bounced back from COVID? And I guess knowing that the place is requiring a mask, I'm quite game to go to this movie on Saturday. And I've got another question after that, but
sure. I want to hear more about the Broadway. I am in connection with a lot of theaters in Canada, but for some reason the prairies are a little bit like harder to, it's like you hear tons from Ontario, Quebec, and they're, I think just because they're closer together, they're better at that networking thing. And then we're all just kind of like doing our own thing. So I'm going to check them out for sure. We did try to maintain the mask mandate after it was like officially mandated, and we also at that time had spaced seating. Like there were just like sections of the theater that were like taped off in order to ensure that groups were sitting separately. And we really just found that we couldn't fight that battle on our own anymore. It was like if the government was not going to encourage this on any level, then it really wasn't something that we could be enforcing. And so we see kind of it really depends from screening to screening how much, there's voluntary masking. Our staff is all masked. In terms of people coming in the door, some screenings you might see a lot of people masked and others very few. And with regards to your comment about like returning audiences, September appears to be one of our busiest months of all time.
Wow.
Yeah, so it really had, and it like literally September was when the shift happened. People just seemed suddenly very ready to start coming back to films. October, we're not quite done the math yet, but it also felt to be one of our busiest months. And part of that is the programming that we do. And part of that, I think, is just like where the community, I think Alberta, Edmonton is all kind of, probably very different than, even though we're next door neighbors to Saskatoon. And part of that's also how the government has chosen to speak about these issues. So yeah, all that being said, some of our screenings are more highly attended than others. So if you are a horror fan, horror is huge in Edmonton. And when we play horror movies, a lot of people come out. So those are going to feel a little less safe in terms of like COVID safety. New release foreign films are generally a little less, like you might get 15 to 30 people in a 500-seat theater. So personally, I feel comfortable like, you know, wearing a mask until I get to my seat. And then I'm usually seated very far away from, you know, anyone else. And that feels pretty good in terms of environments that I end up in. I feel like I had one other thought about that, but I don't want to take up too much time. I know time's starting to run out, and I see there's some comments in the chat as well.
Can I then, here's a supplementary. Interesting that you talk about the horror. The Broadway is starting on Friday, they're calling it the Fantastic Film Festival. So I think got something like 10 days full of what I thought was sci-fi and horror movies, neither of which interest me. But there's an LGBT themed film playing on the 19th. Why or where it came from and why it's fantastic, I don't know, but it's I think somewhat archival. But interesting enough, a few years ago at the Victoria Film Festival, there was a film called 2 for 1, and they called it the first trans romantic comedy, and starring Gavin Crawford, and made in Victoria. And it was I thought great. I thought, well, this should be in mainstream movies. This is a really entertaining movie. So I go to the Broadway to suggest that maybe they bring it in. And of course, the first answer is, do you know how often we have people come in that have a project that they would like us to do for them? Okay, understand that one. The next piece I got was that community has not been very supportive of when movies come in. And we got it in, and we had over 80 people. It took a lot of pushing, and we had to bring it through the film classification board and all kinds of stuff in Saskatchewan. But it was a success, and I think we paid the screening fee and had the director come in, and we had a profit of $69 at the end of it. But I remember when the last movie I went to was a few weeks ago, and it was Bros at our local Galaxy. And there was no worry about masks because they were my group of 4 and 4 other people in the theater. And I remember going to Brokeback Mountain at one of the Cineplex theaters years ago. And I think there were 6 of us in the theater. And so I think what they said was correct, in that our people just don't seem to come out to the movies you think they would. And I just wonder if you found that at all with Metropole.
So just a quick thought on suggestions. I want to say that if I had not heard of this 2 for 1, I'm going to look it up. I love hearing about these kinds of like lost gems. And if people send us recommendations, we have a form on the website. Anytime you think of a movie that you think, oh, it would be great if Metro played that, it's totally fine to just throw it into the forum. You might not get a response back. Sometimes it'll trigger a programming idea and we'll run with it. Sometimes we'll be like, it doesn't really make sense to screen that right now because of a bunch of other kind of holistic kind of ideas about programming. Sometimes the film just will not be available. And so, that's something that we do come up against, is that, there's like, for a variety of reasons. So sometimes the distributor, if it's something big like we're in our 25th anniversary year of Titanic, the distributor will not let us screen it because the mainstream theaters want to screen it. And they can get more screening times with them, and they don't want to compete with us. So we can't play Titanic. And then other times the film maybe hasn't been restored yet. So there's no print available, and there's no like digital quality exhibition print available. Sometimes no one even knows really who owns the film. And so we can't screen a film unless we can find the rights owner and pay them. And then to add it even more to the mix, we have like a major Canadian distributor that recently stopped distributing, but they still own all those films and they're in negotiations with someone else to take over that catalog. So there's about a dozen films of theirs I want to play in the next 2 months, and there's just no one I can talk to get those rights. So it is a very complicated thing, but please send recommendations when you have them. With audiences, we do, some of our most regular customers are seniors. And that said, we do also see that we get a limited number of seniors coming out to films. And some of the things that have been mentioned in the chat, like the transportation, we have definitely thought of this idea of having like a senior bus night. And so I love that. And if Sage wants to talk to us about like more about exploring that idea, I think that would be very cool. Yeah, I think that I think we get a lot of audiences of a lot of different demographics. I'm just always surprised as someone who's been deeply involved at Metro, and I've been going to Metro since we were in the Citadel in the Ziegler Hall Theater when I was in high school. So sometimes I just assume that everyone is coming, everyone knows what we're doing. And there's just like huge gaps where, you know, people, I mean, we're an iconic building in Edmonton. If you drive by it, you can't miss it. And we just had our marquee restored and it's absolutely gorgeous. But people maybe don't even realize what we're doing in here. So definitely great to get the word out in whatever way we can.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Sydney had a comment in the chat about combining opera and black and white films. That's one of her favorite experiences.
Yeah,
and,
is there a specific screening that you've been to, Sydney? I'm just curious.
Yes, I can't remember what it was, is the truth, but Edmonton Opera did it in the 90s, and it was absolutely stunning. It was a black and white movie that maybe had Rita Hayworth or, you know, one of the incredible acting queens of that era. And the music combined, oh, it may have been the symphony even. It was either Edmonton Opera or the symphony that did this. And it was the most stunning experience. It was quite for me beyond film or opera, and I love both.
Yes.
And I don't know what that is about. I never really talked to anyone who talked about why it is so powerful, but I remember just leaning back in the Jubilee Auditorium and going, you know, this is as close to heaven as this woman is ever going to get.
That's awesome. Yeah, we have done silent films with a live score in the past. So, and I love those, you know, when we first opened in this theater, our grand opening was a screening of a Danish film, The Passion of Joan of Arc, which is like a classic silent era film. And we had a local band do live music for it. And same experience that, like, I just thought, like, this is peak experience right here. We also played Nanook of the North and had the throat singer Tanya Tagak come and do a live performance. And that was incredible. And that came about because they were touring that. So they were going from theater to theater with this performance. And so they had the ticket pricing all involved. And that's a lot easier than us like arranging it ourselves, because to pay an artist to create a whole like musical performance for like an hour-and-a-half long film is a big financial, you know, it's just a lot. We have to, it's not like paying someone to come play for a half hour before a film. It's like you have to write a whole new thing and rehearse it, and it's got to be long. So we definitely want to keep doing that. And opera had not been considered, but we do have an organ here in the theater, and it just sits off, and people don't even notice it's there, but it's just sitting off to the side of the screen. And so we have started having someone come in before Sunday Classics, and as people are coming in, they're just playing the organ. Or when we did Nosferatu.
Well, how fun is that? That's just amazing.
It's so
we're right down to our very final minute. Thank you so much, Heather, for such an inspiring talk. I wish we had more time. And thank you to all of you for coming out today. And we hope we will see you all next week when we will have Ashley Smith, who will discuss the Rainbow Resource Center in Winnipeg. You can contact us at agingwithprideyeg@gmail.com. We'll see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you.